Jersey's own Zach Gelb.
Or maybe it's Pennsylvania. Anyhow, it's one of the two, I'm pretty sure.
The Zach Gelb Show continues
On Fox Sports 920, The Jersey.
Welcome back in. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920, The Jersey. Time in the Princeton Orthopedic Associate Studios is 4:16. Mets off today, but they will get ready to have a big three-game series in Miami up against the Marlins. Verrett and Conley on the mound tomorrow. Now joining us on the hotline, a man that actually introduced me at my bar mitzvah and is the great Mets radio play-by-play voice for the Mets baseball on WOR. And I don't know if there was any pork chops at my bar mitzvah, as that was a great line from Howie Rose in the Doc and Darryl documentary, and that is Howie Rose who joins us right now. Howie, thanks for a few minutes, and how are you?
My pleasure, Zach. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and I appreciate you giving us a few minutes today. So before we talk a little Mets-Marlins, the big news is Mike Piazza's going to the Hall of Fame this weekend on Sunday. What was your favorite Mike Piazza home run call that you were a part of?
To be honest with you, it's going to surprise people because, well, now that I think of it, I didn't actually make the call. I thought you were going to ask me my favorite Mike Piazza home run. I guess the one people would expect that I would say when it comes to my favorite Piazza call would be the September 21st, 2001 homer against the Braves. But really, the one that was pure baseball as opposed to all of the other stuff that was involved in that September 21st game was one that was in 1998, Mike's first year with the Mets. Late in the season, they were in the race for a wild card, or for the wild card in those days, and they were playing the Astros in Houston. And Mike hit a home run in the ninth inning with 2 out to tie a game off of Billy Wagner that eventually win the game in extra innings on a Todd Hundley homer. But what I got a kick out of, I was doing TV that day, and when Piazza hit his home run to the opposite field, into the bleachers in right center field in the old Astrodome, the only thing I heard in that ballpark as Mike circled the bases was Gary Cohen, who was doing radio for the Mets, delivering his call rather loudly. And after the game, we were talking about it. He said, that's funny, because when Mike was running around the bases, the only thing I heard was you screaming. So we were probably the only two audible voices in the Astrodome when Mike hit a home run that was huge down the stretch in 1998.
I'm surprised by that answer because I definitely thought it was going to be the one after 9/11, and we all know that was a prodigious home run, and it meant so much. It was more than just a baseball game. It gave people something to cheer about after what was a devastating time, not only in New York, but our entire country. Mm-hmm. Just what was the emotion in the ballpark like that night when you take a look back at it?
Very heavy with grief, heavy with suspicion, because it was the first time 40-odd thousand people had gathered in one place since September 11th. The wound was so fresh, so open, that I think there was a lot of apprehension. And that's why, and I've talked about this at length recently, I've really come to understand only recently what that home run meant beyond simply that night. I didn't at the time. And for the longest time, I really didn't consider that home run when I considered memorable home runs in Mets history because, the Mets won that game, but they didn't win the division that year, even though they had crept to within striking distance that night. It was a period that, in a sense, I've just tried to put on a shelf all by itself. And so it was more a piece to me of Americana than it was baseball, even though it was a very sad state of Americana at that time. But it's only in recent years, as I've heard people talk about how much that home run meant to them as individuals, that I've really sort of warmed up to it in the context that I suppose it belongs.
That home run clearly wasn't going to change anything that happened in our country. We know there were still mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, grandparents that would never come home again. But really, you take a look back at what sports played in that healing process, the Piazza home run, and then also the Pats-Jets game when Joe Andruzzi came running out and his brothers are New York City firefighters with the American flag. That sports really did, I want to say, maybe distracted some people from thinking about what happened, although everyone clearly knew what did happen, but it did play an instrumental role in the healing process, Howie.
And that's really a bit of commentary where sports best fits in this society, because it was very much a diversion that night. And too often, I think, we think of sports and the way we speak about it and the way we write about it as life and death. And it's not. It's entertainment. it's certainly a profession for the people who are involved in it, and careers are at stake based on performance. You can't escape that. But as far as the rest of us are concerned, as it pertains simply to what it represents apart from those who actually participate, it's fun and games, and it should be treated as such. And I think that, the realization that night that it was okay to feel good about a home run, even though nothing was going to change what happened 10 days prior, I think was the first little crack in the grief that started to suggest, you know what, it's okay to enjoy a diversion again.
Howie Rose joins us right now. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey, talking to the play-by-play voice of the New York Metropolitans on WOR. So Mike Piazza was traded to the Mets from the Marlins. Brief stint there from being traded from the Dodgers on May 22nd. I was talking to Bobby V yesterday. He was in a bathroom when he found out the news. Mike Piazza thought he was going to the Cubs, came out of the shower, and he was going to the Mets. So where were you that day when Mike Piazza was traded to the Mets?
Awaiting the news. There was a certain sort of imminent feel to it because a lot of momentum had built up over the day or two prior because everybody knew he was about to be traded. It wasn't that he was being traded from the Dodgers to the Marlins. That was the real shock. But once the Marlins got him, and remember they had just finished cleaning house after winning the World Series the year before, everyone knew it was like buying a house and fixing it up and reselling it. The only thing they were going to do was flip them. And the question was going to be to whom? And as a lot of pressure started to build on the Mets to make the move because he was just what they needed at the time, it started to take on some legs, and it became pretty evident in the 24 to 48 hours leading up to the finalization of the deal that it was probably going to happen. So it wasn't so much a shock as it was, a very pleasant surprise juxtaposed with where we might have been 2 weeks prior that, hey, Mike Piazza's a Met.
Can you describe his competitive nature? Because from seeing it from the outside, and you got to cover him and call out of his games, Mike Piazza, to me, when I was growing up as a kid, he was a role model to young Mets fans, and he was a rock star. He was bigger than life in New York, and I'm sure his competitive nature, he wanted to be on that field each and every day. And Bobby V was even saying yesterday it was hard to try to sit him down out of that lineup.
Yeah, he was, I think, because of his laid-back demeanor, a lot more competitive than some people might realize or give credit for, because too often we just look at an outer sort of persona and assume that we know what's ticking within, and we don't. Mike was very, very passionate. He was impossible to get out of the lineup unless he was really, really hurt. And he was extremely competitive. So, for people who suggest otherwise would say to me that they really didn't watch him play very much.
And one of the all-time great rivalries was Roger Clemens going up against Mike Piazza, and you saw the competitive nature there. Mike would just kill him with long ball after long ball, even after when Roger threw at him with both a ball and a bat. So looking back at it, what stands out to you about the Roger Clemens-Mike Piazza rivalry?
Just that Piazza owned him until Clemens snapped, and a lot of us like to ascribe that to roid rage, which may or may not have been a factor. But it clearly was irrational given the stage, given the moment. It was the World Series, and there are a lot of people, or some people anyway, who felt, Piazza should have fought him. There should have been a brawl. Well, it is the World Series. And forget about the chance of an injury from what would have been a bench-clearing brawl, and that certainly was possible. But you're going to deal with suspensions in the World Series? I mean, seriously, if a situation like that evolved to where both Clemens and Piazza were the main combatants in the kind of fight that would have resulted in suspension, then both of them probably would have been gone for the series. Who needed that? So it was a surreal moment. You never expect to see something like that in the World Series, and it was singularly instigated by, caused by, and perpetrated by Roger Clemens.
And we're going to play this moment later on in the show because all week we've been looking back at Mike Piazza memories, but we're going to go into a little bit more about that Roger Clemens-Mike Piazza rivalry. But still, one of my favorite games as a Met fan that I've ever attended was back in 2002 when Sean Estes threw behind him, and then Sean Estes took him deep, and then Mike got some revenge by taking him deep as well, Howie.
Well, that was almost predictable. Not the Estes part. Estes couldn't even hit him. I mean, Estes wanted to hit Clemens, and he missed him by 10 feet. And he missed his butt, too. It's not like he was throwing at his head. He was throwing behind him. And he still missed him by a wide margin. But, you've just got me thinking all of these Mike Piazza, Roger Clemens moments and famous home runs that Mike hit. But really, my favorite Piazza home run was one that he hit against the Yankees, but it had nothing to do with Roger Clemens. It actually was the first home run ever hit at Citi Field, even though it was hit back in, I believe it was 1999, because he hit a home run off of Ramiro Mendoza of the Yankees. That was the hardest hit ball I think I ever saw at Shea Stadium. And it went beyond the tent that they had. It was a hospitality tent they would build for the Subway Series games. It went beyond that tent out over the left field wall, right in an area where basically the left field stands sit today at Citi Field. So I think Piazza actually should be given credit for hitting one home run in two different ballparks with one swing.
You bring up a great point. I actually remember right behind the Pepsi porch because I actually had a wristband that would get me into that area. So I never knew that. So that's a funny statistic as we're talking to Howie Rose, who joins us. All right, let's get to some of the Mets right now. Like we said, they're embarking on a journey down south, and they're going to be playing the Miami Marlins in a big 3-game series. Miami does play the Phillies tonight, and the Mets are off. What do you think the outfield's going to look like tomorrow, Howie?
Good question. I don't think, in fact, I can guarantee you we're not going to see Yoenis Cespedes out there. I would say that there's some question as to whether we'll see him in the lineup at all. They're going, I believe they're throwing a lefty, Adam Conley, tomorrow night.
Yep.
So that'd be the perfect opportunity to play Juan Lagares. So I guess just based on the pitching matchups, we should expect to see Lagares in center field tomorrow. Michael Conforto has taken some balls out there, but, they're asking a lot of some of these kids to start experimenting with positions at the major league level that they haven't played before or hardly even in the minor leagues. And for Conforto, that includes right field. So, I think as long as there's a lefty on the mound, you'll see Lagares in center field, and then maybe they do give Conforto an opportunity to play out there. But when you talk about Jose Fernandez on Saturday, and that's tough enough for anyone, much less a guy like Conforto who struggled so badly for the better part of 2 months before a very brief excursion down to Las Vegas. It's an issue. It's a question. They're going to mix and match as best they can. Curtis Granderson does not have the mobility to play center field at Marlins Park because of its spaciousness. So I think Lagares tomorrow, and they'll go from there.
It's so intriguing to see the way that Terry's going to handle this lineup, but now they've been getting some more depth with the way that Wilmer Flores has been playing, and you have Jose Reyes back. But how do you think Terry Collins has handled this Wilmer Flores situation? Because he's been red hot in this month of July, and I think he needs to get some more reps, Howie.
Terry's in a very difficult situation.
He is.
They brought in Jose Reyes for the reason, among others, that he should be able to provide some speed to a team that desperately needs some. So he's been leading off, and the results have been lukewarm at best. You can't hit 220 and play every day as a leadoff hitter. But it's not fair to Jose to suggest that this is who he is right now, because he's only had about 2.5 weeks back at the major league level after a rehab period in the minor leagues that really wasn't all that long. So I don't know what realistically to be able to expect from Reyes, but I know 2.5 weeks isn't enough to make any kind of determination. And so then Wilmer Flores kind of gets caught in the middle. You've got a shortstop, second base combination that's been very, very good for them, Cabrera and Walker. And James Loney is a professional hitter who has done a good job against right-handed pitchers, which means right now Wilmer plays against lefties, period, unless somebody else needs a day off, as was the case with both middle infielders yesterday. Or maybe he gets so hot that they just have to keep riding. But it's a challenge for Terry, no question about it.
And the glove is the big underrated part on Loney. He was exceptional on Tuesday.
Yeah, he's got soft hands at first base. He doesn't have great range, and I think we've noticed that. But I think when you talk about the potential for saving infielders some errors, James Loney has done a very good job of that. And he's not what you would label in capital letters impact player, But he's been something of a godsend when you consider having lost Lucas Duda for as long as they did. There was no way they were going to take a kid out of Double-A like Dominic Smith and rush him to the big leagues. So, were we right back where we were a year ago, looking at Eric Campbell playing an inordinate amount of time for a guy who's, at best a 4A player, it would appear? That's where Loney came in, and I think it was a very fortuitous situation to have Loney available and give them the production that he has and the amount of time that he's been used.
On the way out here with Howie Rose, Mets play-by-play voice on WR. I got to get your reaction on this. There's a bunch of sources on Twitter that are saying the Islanders have talked to the Mets about moving to Queens. Do you think that could be something that could possibly be happening?
I would not rule it out. I know that this is certainly no great revelation. The Barclays situation is imperfect at best and miserable at worst. And I'm sure that there's a feeling that it would be great to get a fresh start in the market someplace else. But, you don't just snap your fingers and put a building up. I know that there had been talk in the past about potentially finding some land in Willets Point to build an arena. I would not rule out the fact that one day it might happen.
Now, before we let you run, like I said in the intro, you did my bar mitzvah introduction back when I was 13 years old as a kid on Long Island, and I remember that call. I wish I could find it. I still got to go back and find it. I have it somewhere on one computer, but you said Matsui going back, he falls down. Damon going back, he trips over Matsui, and this ball is gone. And then you introduced myself, and I came out like an MVP, and one of my fans, actually not one of my fans, one of my friends chanted out, and then Gelb woke up. So where does that rank in your career, my bar mitzvah home run call?
I would think that's right near the top.
Howie, you're the best. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You got it. My pleasure. All the best.
You too. There's Howie Rose joining us. I got to find that clip. I'll play that for you tomorrow. But Howie Rose, he did introduce me at my bar mitzvah. We got that arranged, and I hit a home run, a mock home run off Mariano Rivera in the World Series, and I was the World Series MVP. But when I heard that call for the first time, because I got to hear it before, I got played at my bar mitzvah where they introduced you, and I came out with two smoking hot girls and started doing all the dance moves, and I probably had two left feet at the time and still may do, but Howie Rose was just absolutely great that night, introducing me at my bar mitzvah, and it was my friend Alex Eisen. I'll never forget that. The music, I came out to Up in Here, the DMX Party Up song, and when I was rolling on out, and celebrating the bar mitzvah, just read the big Torah portion. I had the Howie call. My friend Alex Eisen, son of a you-know-what, screams out, "Hey, Gelb, you just woke up!" As he probably thought I was dreaming, because that call, it's probably something that I have dreamed. So you have the Mets in action tomorrow up against the Marlins, and the Marlins are currently, tonight, going to be playing the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Marlins took the first two games, and then they lost the third game yesterday. And